The European migrant crisis is no better today. In fact, maybe it's worse than it was a little while ago. I started seeing reports that a big group, a massive group of far-right extremists were going around and beating migrants in the city called Chemnitz, I believe it's pronounced. It's eastern, like southeastern Germany. It's kind of like eastern, not too far south. And I started looking into the story, and this was a couple days ago. And apparently the protests have continued. So my understanding so far is that there were was an Iraqi guy and a Syrian guy got into a fight with someone, beat him up. Dude ended up dying. A bunch of people got angry, started protesting, turned to a riot. People got beat up. And now it's spread and gotten a lot bigger. So I've got a few different sources pulled up. And let's read through this, starting with the BBC. Germany migrants, protesters face off in Chemnitz 8 hours ago. Rival protests over a murder in the East German city of Chemnitz have ended with several people injured as objects were hurled by both sides, police say. Far-right activists had gathered in the center for a second day as a Syrian and an Iraqi remained under arrest on suspicion of Sunday's deadly stabbing. Anti-Nazi activists rallied just meters away, accusing the far-right of using the death for political ends. Injuries were caused when protesters on both sides threw objects, police say. German Chancellor Angela Merkel had warned that vigilante justice would not be tolerated. And we can see Nazis no thanks reads a flag carried by a counter-demonstrator in Chemnitz. Police warned masked demonstrators who were picking up stones in the city about 200 kilometers south of Berlin that their actions were being filmed. Earlier, authorities said police were investigating alleged assaults on an Afghan, a Syrian, and a Bulgarian during the unrest that broke out Sunday. Reports have included mentions of protesters chasing foreigners, though there are few details. Chemnitz police, quoted by the local broadcaster MDR, said, "We did not anticipate such a total of participants on Sunday." Bigger crowds thronged the city center on Monday. MDR estimated the far-right turnout to be 5,000, with some 1,000 leftists opposing them. We'll stop right here, because I want to point something out. I keep reading that these people are far-right. And I have to wonder, if 5,000 people show up, are they really far-right? At what point does far-right just become the normal person in your city or country? Are they calling them far-right because they're upset over murder? That doesn't make someone far-right, and I wonder why they're doing that. It's actually kind of worrisome when you realize what is going on in Europe, in Germany, in Europe, Freudian slip, in Europe and Germany. So another thing that's concerning to me is that only 1,000 leftists came out to oppose them. When I was in Hamburg last year, it was like thousands of black bloc, the largest black bloc in history, I'm told, and I had to leave because it got so dangerous. But now we're seeing that the far right outnumbers the leftists. And this is what makes me believe it's not really far right individuals. I believe it's probably more run-of-the-mill Germans who are just angry with what's going on. And this is what should really be scary to people. There is going to be a racial awakening, they call it. It's happening. And I don't like it because I don't like identitarianism. I don't like the idea that we're going to reduce everyone to a collective or certain characteristics instead of letting people be individuals. I recognize that there are national level statistics and there are differences between people and all that stuff, but I like to make sure we keep our laws and our policies and our politics focused on the individual. And there's no right answer. I don't know what the right answer is. All I know is that I want to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what we're seeing here is a fight broke out. It became very identitarian. People are angry that apparently an Iraqi guy and a Syrian guy may have killed somebody. Now we're hearing that people may have started attacking other migrants. So what's going to happen? Well, Europe is having a ton of people migrate to their various countries. And what's going to end up happening is racial animosity. You're going to see that people who are white German, and actually, I think the important thing to pull up, let me pull up a different source from here, because I believe the man who was killed was actually Cuban German. And I've got a bunch of stories. I have a photo in here somewhere. Maybe I don't. But I'm pretty sure the guy who died was a Cuban German guy. I think he was German born. Maybe it's in the BBC one, I can't tell. Anyway, so this is a guy who was German. He was Cuban, so it's not necessarily about race, but it's becoming about kind of like national origin to an extent. Like this guy who died was German, so he got killed and they're mad about it. But these people who are coming to Germany who have a different culture. Actually, I'll say this, I'll deviate a little bit. I think one of the biggest issues we're facing has nothing to do with race. Seriously. I think it's mostly cultural. Most of the stories we hear about are cultural issues, and people conflate them with race. In this circumstance, It's the people coming from the Middle East versus people who are living in Germany. So even when it's a Cuban German man who was killed, people get angry about it. And then we can look at like Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. Zimmerman was Hispanic, Mexican, I'm pretty sure, like half Mexican, but they called him a white guy, and it's because it's really just about differing cultures and an overlap and a misunderstanding and things like that where it becomes racial. But I'll say this: these protests may continue. And we've even got this one tweet. I'm not sure who this man is, Barclays, but he says, "Merkel must go," in quotes. "Tonight, at least 10,000 Germans marched on the streets of Chemnitz after a man was killed by immigrants." Let me play this video. So look, I think this guy, he's probably associated with, he's got a hashtag Make Europe Great Again, so naturally you can see his partisan bias, and the photo on his page is a bunch of people wearing blue hats saying Make Europe Great Again. I don't think it was 10,000 because the BBC is going to put it at 5,000. Maybe it's closer to 5,000, maybe a little bit more. But when you look at that video, I don't see how you can call them far right. Maybe Germany, okay, let me put it this way. Either they're regular people who are fed up demanding Merkel must go because the policies aren't working, or Germany actually is becoming a Nazi country again, right? If you're going to have counter-protesters yelling at them, calling them Nazis and telling them to leave, and 5,000 people wearing regular clothes are marching saying Merkel must go, and you're saying those are Nazis, then what you're arguing effectively is that Germany has become a Nazi country. Like, the Nazis are coming back in Germany. And I brought this up and someone was like, but they are. And I'm like, no, I don't mean like there are neo-Nazis and like groups trying to protest. I mean literally that the core, the element of the German national mindset is going to become Nazis, which I just don't believe it's true. Because even if these people are just upset about mass migration, it doesn't mean they're anywhere near how bad the Nazis. There's a fine line between what the Nazis did and being like, hey, we should control migration a little bit more. But apparently, so Merkel spoke out against this. This is from DW. Merkel slams anti-immigrant protesters in Chemnitz. Rival protesters have been called in Chemnitz a day after a deadly stabbing provoked an anti-immigrant demo. Chancellor Merkel condemned rioters who she said were hunting down foreigners. That's what I heard too. So here, I don't know what this photo is. It says a memorial of flowers and candles in Chemnitz. There you go. The eastern German city of Chemnitz is on high alert as it prepares for far-right and far-left protests and counter-protests on Monday following a spontaneous anti-immigrant demonstration the day before. The right-wing pro-Chemnitz movement has called for a demonstration on Facebook, prompting various leftist groups from the state of Saxony to respond with their own calls for rallies. So I'm not going to get, I'll maybe read into this in a second, but what I want to point out, the alt-right, white identitarians want racial consciousness. They want white people to rise up and get political based on their race. When groups like Black Lives Matter and the regressive left, intersectional feminists, start embracing identitarianism as well, this is exactly what the alt-right wants. Both groups feed off each other. The left tries really, really hard to create this idea of Nazis. That's one of the reasons they call everyone a Nazi, because they want white identitarians to strengthen their identitarian cause. And I talked about this the other day, I think I did. The reason why they changed the definition of racist is so that they can argue against white identitarians without arguing against their own actual ideals. Because they agree, they do the same things. Like if you look at Sarah Jong ragging on white people, they will absolutely attack someone for saying the exact same things if they said a different race. So how do they use these tactics and these same policies? How does the left wants to say we are able to do certain things, to oppress people based on race, okay, to oppress people based on sex. But you can't actually openly advocate for that because most people are going to tell you to fuck off. So how do you get people to be okay with race-based policies? You just argue the other end of the spectrum. Say, we're the ones fighting to oppose racism. And the only way to do that is to not be colorblind and enact racist policies. And the average person goes, wait a minute, but you just had racist policies. And they go, oh, no, we can't be racist. Only white people can. It's them. And the average person says, oh, okay. And thus you end up with racism. And this apparently is what's going to end up happening. Now, the issue we're seeing here, I don't think is part necessarily of the culture war, but I can assure you the left is going to love it just the same. because it allows them to fuel their own fire. Migrants come in for a variety of reasons, economic reasons. Europeans aren't replacing themselves fast enough. The birth rate is down. So they bring in migrants to help support their economies and expand their economies. Because of this, you start to see racial animosity, which it's unfortunate that it happens. And I do believe there is a truth to this idea of intrinsic racism to an extent, where people are going to see someone and view them as an other. But I do believe it has more to do with culture, right? You can overcome these things, but based on your culture. But people are going to see these other cultures coming into their countries. It's going to turn into a tool for actual racists on the left and the right. And then we're going to end up seeing these massive protests. It went on for, I think, 2 days. For all I know, as I'm filming this, it's probably still happening. I have no idea. But Merkel has called it out, and I don't know if that's going to be effective, because as we saw from this tweet, they're chanting Merkel must go. And you've got a lot of people, this photo of Make Europe Great Again. There's like two factions, kind of, that are in line with each other as it comes to the right. The white identitarians want, to varying degrees, a white ethno-state, a country just for white people. And then you have conservatives who just want to preserve culture and maintain certain principles that are inherent to these cultures. But people will point to conservatives and call them Nazis simply because there's Nazis standing behind them. This is one of the arguments I made about what happened in Boston. There was one guy with a Confederate flag. And the left looks over and sees this huge crowd of people and someone waving one Confederate flag, and they assume they all must be racists. But the argument from the people on that side were like, we don't like it, but it's his right to wave it. Then if you're staying on the right looking at the left, you'll see this big group of people on the left and one person waving a Soviet flag. And they'll assume they're all over there socialists and communists. And I actually talked to a DSA guy who denounced it. So what ends up happening is the more extremists love the conflict. And they love the fact, every time a leftist calls someone a Nazi, there are people who are associated with white nationalism who are like, good, because it'll create racial consciousness. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I don't want to prattle on too much more about this, because I think you guys got the general idea. These protests have been going on, and it very well may happen again today. I'm not entirely sure, but we'll see what happens. So that's about it for today. I'll have a video up tomorrow on my main channel, youtube.com/Timcast. So thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you tomorrow.